Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, November 2nd. This is the Cluster API office hours. Welcome. It was great to see some of you in person at KubeCon last week. We canceled the office hours, so this is our first one in 2 weeks. If you are joining us for the first time, you can get edit access to this document by joining the SIG Cluster Lifecycle mailing list. And also, I would like to remind everyone that we are following the CNCF Code of Conduct. So please be respectful to everyone. Raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Cluster API is a sub-project of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. And if you have any agenda items that you'd like to propose or any questions or anything at all, please add them to the discussion topics. And if you would like, you can also add your name to the attendee list. That gives us a good idea of who's attending this meeting over time. All right, so before we start, we like to give a moment in each meeting for anyone who is new to the project or new to this call to say hi and introduce themselves. So if this is your first time joining or not, and you want to say hi, please go ahead. I will mute myself and go for it. And we can't hear you. I think Annie Ruda, I see you're speaking, but I can't hear sound.
Okay. Hi everyone. Now, okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Aniruddha. I'm from India and I'm new to this call, and I've been contributing to CAPI for quite some time. And I got selected in the Cluster API v1.4.0 release team as a shadow. Yeah.
Awesome, welcome. Anyone else?
I'll introduce myself. I'm Anne Flinchbaugh. I work for Microsoft, and a few members of my team are here as well. We're kind of getting interested with I know this is for CAPI in general, but with the CAPI provider. So I'm relatively new to CAPI, so just starting getting involved and learning what's going on.
Welcome, Anne. All right, last call. Okay. All right, so let's get right into it. I guess actually, before we get started, would anyone like to share like any learnings or impressions from KubeCon or anything they learned? I know there are several cluster API sessions, lots of talk about cluster API. Would anyone like to share anything or any general takeaways? Fabrizio?
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank you, everyone. That was a KubeCon, great discussion. Most important, great to see people in person. I think that we had a good discussion in the CAPI status upgrade in the contributor summit. It will be great if we can have some follow-up here in this meeting for managed Kubernetes. Especially where, in my opinion, we are not far away from a solution, eventually also for a dawn. This is one. Second, I would really like to thank you, everyone, at the talk about Cluster API, but especially the team that worked to the tutorial. Both the tutorial have great material. It will be, we should definitely link them or bend them, start linking them from the book and eventually see how to integrate them, because yeah, they are, there was a lot of work. One is about how to write a Cluster API provider. The other is about how to operate Cluster API. This can be really useful to a lot of folks. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, Fabrizio. Mike?
Yeah, I just want to give a big +1 to what Fabrizio just said and kind of support that. I thought it was an amazing session. It was amazing KubeCon. The discussion we had at the Contributor Summit was totally awesome. I got a lot out of it. Thanks to everyone who put kind of thought and effort into that. And yeah, there were some really excellent cluster API sessions happening too. So I don't have much different to add than what Fabrizio just says, but yeah, it was tremendous. And I really send a big shout out to the whole community. It was really exciting to see what was going on there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I echo that as well. It was really great to see everyone. If you have any material that you'd like to share with people who missed it, like either talk slides, recordings, or tutorial material, like feel free to add it in the agenda so that others can find it. All right, so let's start with proposal readouts. I don't know, does anyone have anything they want to point out or any highlights about current proposals in progress? Okay, not seeing any. Oh, Fabrizio?
Just a quick operation. So load balancer provider and managed externality are kind of stuck since a long time. Should we move them to a separate session until someone pick them up? Something like stale.
What do you mean by? Oh, sorry.
Okay, something like stale proposal, something like that. So we don't keeping up asking for update every week when they are not active, basically.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially since this is supposed to be active proposals and we don't want to be carrying proposals. But Guillermo, or did you want to speak about this point or about a other proposal?
About this one.
Okay, go for it.
I was just going to say that I'm planning on taking the managed external TDC provider, but I'm totally fine moving it to a different section until I actually have time to revamp that proposal PR, and then we can move it back to open proposals if that works for everyone.
Yeah, I think I would be in favor of just removing them. I don't think we need to be tracking them in the doc if they're not active. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a section of stale things that is just going to be there. What do you think, Fabrizio? Okay, yeah, feel free to.
I will do it now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let's try to keep the section just for the ones that really need, review and are actively being worked on, so that we can keep ourselves focused on that. And then as soon as these become ready for review again, let's add them back. All right. Let's go into discussion topics. Stefan, you have the first one. Yep. First two, okay. Or three.
First three.
Go for it.
Okay, so first one. We had some security scans running on, I guess, all parts of Cluster API. I don't really know the details. But one finding that came out of that is that essentially when people are scanning our webhook endpoints, our webhook endpoints are not enforcing the TLS version or a min TLS version. Probably debatable how problematic that is or not, but it would be probably good for all of us to just provide a way to only allow, I guess, good TLS versions have a reasonable default so that nobody is annoyed by those security scans at least. And ideally, I guess, if there are some attacks possible, that they're not possible anymore. What I would suggest is essentially doing the same as the API server. So the Kubernetes API server has a command line flag, which is called TLS min version. It is a default of version 1.2. And you can set it to anything between 1.2 and 1.3 at the moment. So that would be my suggestion. There's an alternative, which is something like that's hard-coded to some reasonable value. I was thinking about that option until I discovered that there's also something like 1.3. So maybe so currently I'm in favor of just having a flag, having the same default as Kubernetes, having the same flag name as Kubernetes, having the same possible values as Kubernetes, and documented. So first implemented in core cluster API, documented somewhere as a recommended thing to do for providers. I guess in the provider implementer slide or something. And then other providers, providers in general, can follow that pattern, and we have a consistent flag across all providers. So, and I just want to ask for opinions here. We have an issue which is linked in the second line. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Awesome, thanks for bringing that up. Seeing 3+1s for option 1 in chat. And then Almiko, you have your hand raised. You were first, go for it.
Yeah. So yeah, like I guess option 1 does sound really good. I guess my question for you, Stefan, because I haven't looked at this closely, is there any downside to using option 1 with like a default to 1.2? Is there something we could miss or something?
As far as I'm aware, so quoting Nadir here, every API server in existence to support TLS 1.2 was the statement. What we would definitely do is, I don't know, I can definitely do a check for, let's say, the management Kubernetes versions that we support, which start at 120 at the moment, and just to make sure that it actually still works with 120. So I can definitely double check that we're not running into problems, but usually the only client which is actually calling our webhook is the API server. And if the API server supports it, we shouldn't have any problems.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds good. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something I was missing here, because it seems like option 1 is like, yeah, it's like the clear kind of preference. But yeah, thanks.
Cigar?
I think thanks, Stefan, for bringing this up. As mentioned in the chat, I agree with the first option as well. I also wanted to add on to this discussion and particularly about also including the TLS cipher suites that are used. So similarly, or similar to the Mint TLS version, there's another flag in Kube API server which allows you to specify the TLS cipher suites. I was thinking that since we are on this topic, should we also add or add a configuration to specify the suites used for the webhook server? Any thoughts around that?
Can I answer?
Perfect.
Do we have I guess a recommendation on what the right ciphers are, or can we just do the same as the API server, something like that?
So I think the API server does list out the recommended suites to be used, as well as some insecure ones. So I think we should probably follow the same pattern. And like if you look at the API server documentation, it has a list of algorithms that are supported. We should probably think into using something similar there.
So for me, it would be fine. I think the one thing I would like to do is probably just do the same thing as the API server. And yeah, we can double check again if it's supported by all API servers that we have to support. Yeah, I guess why not? Check.
Yeah, so other folks have given all the reasons why I share other folks' observations about option 1 being the best, but I wanted to bring up a sort of meta point that I think it's actually really important for CAPI to be a transparent wrapper on top of Kubernetes with respect to this type of configuration. If we were to hard code something, then we really do deviate from sort of core vanilla Kubernetes, and that would be, even though maybe the best option for users, sort of problematic from an architectural standpoint. So I just wanted to express that sort of strongly held opinion that so long as Kubernetes allows things like TLS version 1.0, I think it's important that CAPI exposes that as well.
Cigar?
Specifically for the TLS version, at least, I think, I guess Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you had checked, and the default version that is used in the API server, I think since 1.20 or even slightly before that, has been 1.2, which is basically if we do not set something, the API server chooses 1.2 as the default one, right?
Oh, I was only checking what Mint TLS version the API server is using for its own endpoint. I didn't do any research on what the API server is doing on client side when it's calling our webhook, if that's what you meant.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a lot of +1s both in chat and here for option 1. Are there any dissenting opinions? Anyone thinks we shouldn't do option 1 for any reason? Fabrizio.
I'm okay with option 1. I just have a question. Not sure it's already covered in the issue. Is what is the upgrade story? So is this a concern for upgrade, for cluster API upgrades or not? It is just that we are going for cluster cutter upgrade, we are going to delete current deployment, recreate a new one, and things will just start using the new TLS settings.
Yep, that would be the case. So by adding those 2 flags now with the default behavior, essentially as soon as you deploy a new version of the provider, which has that baked in, it would already use that.
Okay, and for people not using cluster cutter, we have to write some instruction.
No, it doesn't depend on cluster cutter at all. It's just as soon as you publish a new controller with those flags and their default values, as soon as you actually run that controller, you will end up with that default behavior.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Thanks. Yeah. Did anyone mention FIPS requirements yet?
I don't believe so.
That might be the root cause for our finding, but you probably know better than me.
Yeah, I can't off the top of my head. I can't recall if there are. So FIPS requirements are yeah, it's a standard. I think driven by the U.S. government, I think, and there are basically one of the requirements is that there are only certain TLS ciphers may be used. I can't recall off the top of my head if there's anything about a TLS version, but FIPS, from what I understand, is behind the behind the curve. So I'll go and check, but I know that there are cluster API end users that that are bound, by FIPS requirements, but they are they're also Kube API server users. So I guess anything that is any sort of limitations that are already accepted for the control plane, if they're fine for FIPS, then we'll be fine for FIPS too.
And Gar is stating in chat that FIPS states 1.2 as the minimum version. All right, I'm going to move on to the next topic just in the interest of time, since there are quite a few things on the agenda, but thanks for Stefan for the really clear notes here and for bringing this up. If you have any more comments or questions, there's the issue link right here. Feel free to weigh in async. All right, Stefan,
okay.
Here you go again, number 2.
Yeah, so while we were at KubeCon, a few discussions started in upstream Kubernetes, I guess, but as far as I know, mostly around KubeADM. So essentially, there's a big effort to migrate from the old Kubernetes registry, KSGCRIO, to the new one, registry.ksio. And the reason is essentially that they want to move from the Google hosted Kubernetes registry to, I think it's like 15 individual registries distributed, I think, across different clouds and regions. So TLDR is the new registry is much cheaper. They were close to running out of budget for this year. I think they now have a fix because AWS is sponsoring a lot. But there's still a lot of effort upstream that everyone migrates as soon as possible to the new registry. What they're doing in KubeADM is, so previously they auto-migrated to the new registry with Kubernetes 1.25. So if you were running KubeADM upgrade to 1.25, if you didn't override the registry, you were auto-migrated from KSGCRIO to registry.ksio. And we did the same in cluster API. I'm not sure in which release we included it, maybe only on main. I have to double check. But we definitely implement the same auto-migration. And now, because they're running out of money faster. They are backporting that until 1.22, even though 1.22 is actually already out of support in Kubernetes. So yeah, it's a high priority thing. So the cherry picks are ongoing in Kubernetes. As far as I know, they will also write a blog post so that everyone knows why they make that exception essentially to the entire release and support policy. What we want to do is essentially do the same for cluster API. So first of all, we would like to change our behavior, that we're not only doing this starting with 125, but also with 122, and also backport this into cluster API 1.2. So essentially starting with 1.2.6, we would also have that behavior. Yeah, maybe Lumi can give some more context on just saw various like threats and issues.
No,
yeah.
your summary is pretty good.
So just to clarify what this means concretely would be merging this PR and backporting it to previous releases. Is that correct?
Into 1.2, I would say. I wouldn't go as far as doing another 1.1 patch release, because it's all the support since a while.
Got it. Are there any risks that you see associated with doing this, or any downsides?
I think yep, if I got it correctly, the risk is essentially that if people are running their environment, let's say semi-air gapped, something like, oh, we have a firewall clearance for exactly that registry, but not a new one. I think that's the one risk that is there. But I would still essentially follow what they're doing in KubeADM and take that risk, document it very clearly. I mean, people can overwrite the registry, so they can say, they can read the reason out, see, okay, that behavior changed, and then they can overwrite this to actually use the old registry, and then nothing would change. Yeah, but it's a trade-off.
Are there any actions required by providers?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, ideally do something like the same. And so one additional PR that we're doing, which I forgot to mention here, is starting with 1.3 and also backward to 1.2, we will change our manifests that we release, so that if someone deploys, I guess, the core provider with cluster cuddle, they will actually pull the images from the new registry. The images were already all the time published to both registries, but we just forgot to adjust our manifest, and I actually only found it out because I saw cap C already changed. So I think that's another topic which would be good if providers can actually publish manifests, which is a new registry. If they're already using the regular image promotion thing, they're already available there. It's just a matter of actually generating the manifest that way. I can add it here. I can also add it to the migration document. Oh, it's maybe already in the migration document.
Both sounds good. Yeah. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about this? All right. We have a +1 from Fabrizio in chat to align with Kubernetes. I'm also +1 on doing the same as KubeADM in Kubernetes. Okay, release updates.
1 second.
Actually, you know what?
So,
let me give you a break, Stefan, since you've been,
that's also
if
fine.
that's okay. Let's skip around and go to Jack, and then we can come back to release updates afterwards. How's that? Cool. Okay, Jack, you want to talk about managed Kubernetes or managed clusters?
Yes, unfortunately for Stefan, mine will be really short. But I just wanted to say, so this is a KubeCon outcome based on lots of really great conversations at KubeCon, in particular with Richard, are you here? I think you were here. Yep, Richard's here, Richard Case. At SUSE, we are going to form a working group to propose, or at least discuss proposing managed Kubernetes as a first-class cluster API resource. And so I just wanted to make a sort of call for participation for anyone who's interested in managed Kubernetes going forward. Please reach out to myself or Richard Case or Winnie from VMware. We're going to, I think, be leading this effort in the coming months to kind of make a more durable long-term plan. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't think that it's really my job to provide my opinions, but I'm really excited about where this is going to go. I'm really excited. There's a ton of excitement around this. This seemed to be a very big topic in the Contributor Summit last week. So that's really it. Please reach out to myself, Richard, or Winnie.
Thanks, Jack. Do you want to maybe give some details about what this means for current providers who are supporting managed Kubernetes today?
Right. So I'm not sure if there's I can say there's anything definitive, but so I'll use CapZ as an example. So CapZ has a fairly robust community of folks using the managed AKS solution. And we are supporting that with a sort of very particular way of using the control plane and cluster API CRDs to do that. And Kappa has a slightly different approach. And I think I'm talking slightly abstractly here, but it's hard to describe this, in context for folks who don't have a lot of experience. Kappa took a slightly different approach, and I think Richard and Winnie and I are going to huddle and figure out if there is a way for CapZ and Kappa to, at least before there's a sort of long-term cluster API CRD around this, or architecture around this, to adhere to a common pattern so that the Kappa and CapZ user communities can have a sort of similar surface area. Because one of the big use cases here is cross-provider managed Kubernetes. So folks want to be using EKS and AKS and GKE. And so it's difficult to say exactly how that's going to go, but this is really where I want to encourage folks to reach out to myself and Richard and Winnie if you have a stake in this, because our interest really is to achieve as practically as possible a consistent interface across providers. It'll probably be a little imperfect in the near term, which is why the way to make this really sort of durably consistent in the long term is to build this into CAPI. So now's the chance to really get any of your architectural opinions sort of considered and baked into the proposal.
Thanks. Any questions for Jack about this? All right. Going back to you, Stefan, about release updates. Oh, sorry. Actually, Joe, you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, it took me forever to find the hand. Just a real quick, so I wouldn't be the person for Cluster API OCI to help with that. But I think that's something that we'd be interested in being a part of. What is kind of the timeline that you guys are looking to drive that design and move that forward? Is that by next release kind of thing, or longer term?
Definitely longer term. I don't have a definitive, I could probably guesstimate 6 to 18 months kind of thing. It's a non-trivial change to go into CAPI. And then, if we can do a sort of best case scenario and get a consensus around how this looks like, how managed Kubernetes and cluster API looks, then, add a non-trivial amount of time after that for the provider community to sort of catch up to whatever that proposal ends up being. So again, to clarify for folks who don't really understand what the high level is that managed Kubernetes was not a first-class cluster API consideration. So it's not part of this sort of standard set of CRD primitives. So the community around CAPI that supports managed Kubernetes, CapZ, Kappa in particular, have had to kind of bend the rules a little bit in their implementations of managed Kubernetes, because there isn't an obvious way to do that from a CAPI perspective. So Joe, I think the shorter, although still longer term work stream will be defining how this looks in cluster API. And then the longer term will be going out and advocating within the existing, user community in CAPZ and Kappa and CAPG and CAP-OCI, et cetera, to advocate for revving their managed Kubernetes proposal to adhere to the new CAPI proposal. So that'll take some time. Does that all that make sense?
Yeah, and then just one other question. So this would be, given the current proposal, kind of revving on that multiple times to make sure it works across everybody. So not throwing away the current proposal, but revving on that possibly.
Do you mean the current markdown proposal that's in the cluster API repo?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think there are any reasons. There are no reasons to throw that proposal away at all. There's a lot of clarity in there. It's possible that we may amend that with some more concrete guidance for the provider community in the interim when there's not a CAPI managed
perfect.
cluster.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right, this time for real, Stefan, go for it.
Yep, just want to give an update on ongoing stuff around releases in general. So first of all, the plan is to release the first beta for 1.3.0. And I just want to reiterate what we put into the document so that everyone gets kind of in the written, I guess, of how we want to do releases in the future. So beta will be out today. That means if folks already want to start adopting, you can essentially start trying out 1.3. And I'm talking about providers, of course. You can already try it 1.3. Going forward from now on, changes will be, I guess, limited. And that's the next point. So that's just a quote from document. Essentially, all changes that we would make going forward, which would impact providers that are adopting cluster API, would go through some kind of, hey, let's serve it in office hours, let's have approval on issues, etc., etc. As far as I'm aware, there are no such changes planned in the next 4 weeks. As of now, at least. But yeah, that's the process. So beta out today, another beta next week. And the first release candidate is planned for in 2 weeks. And after RC, we have a feature freeze on that release branch, and we will also create a release branch on that day. And then from this point forward, only cherry picks and basically only, I guess, improving quality, documentation, bug fixes, test fixes, text coverage, stuff like that, but no new features. So if you have anything that has or should make it into the next release, we have like, I guess, 2 weeks to bring that up. Otherwise, 1.4, just to surface that explicitly. Did you want to say something about it? Can make a pause here.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say also good news is we know when 1.4 will be out if we stick to the plan. So if you don't get your thing in 1.3, you have a definitive answer of when it will be released next time.
Absolutely. Okay, next point. Essentially we continue to work on preparation steps for next release team. URush is currently working on setting up a Slack group and a GitHub team so that we have a way to mention people somewhere so they get notifications. And I'm currently working, or let's say I'm writing it, but we discussed it also a bit in our team. Essentially working on documentation on the tasks that we usually do for releases. I try to get up a first PR probably tomorrow, I hope at the latest on Friday, and then try to CC all the people to review it. And then we have a bit more time to fix it up, I guess, until the next release cycle starts. That's it from us.
Awesome. Thank you, Stefan. Any questions or comments or concerns about the beta release or the release team setup or anything release related? All right, thank you, URush, for setting up the Slack group and GitHub team. And yeah, I think this will be really helpful for communicating. And I think one of the things we discussed also when we were thinking of doing the release team is we want to try to make sure that we're not, doing all like release communication and internal DMs. We want to keep things in the channel and in threads and on GitHub so that everyone can follow along. So we can use the Slack team group to tag people and discuss release related matters. All right. Anything else? Any other topics or general questions? Comments? Shout outs? Okay, I don't see any provider updates. Do any of the providers want to say anything about what's going on in their world? All right. Okay, well, good to see everyone. Hope everyone is resting and recovering after a week of travel. And we'll see you all online. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.